Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Texas A&M, Mike Elko heading into 2025. They just seem to be one of those teams that is flying under the radar. And you look at how the national media talks about this conference. A lot of buzz, a lot of talk around Arch Manning in Texas. A lot of talk around DJ Lagway in Florida. A lot of talk around Lenore Sellers in South Carolina. For the life of me, I don't understand why we're not talking about Marcel Reed and Texas A&M, like some of those teams that we just listed, where you look at Marcel Reed in 2024 and say, look, it was not perfect. The Texas A&M fans certainly know that. But I thought you saw some really good things from Marcel Reed that can give you a lot of confidence that he could be a really good football player for Texas A&M in 2025. Now, I think the most important thing to note is Mike Elko really agrees with that. If Mike Elko did not like Marcel Reed or did not think Marcel Reed could be the guy for Texas A&M, he would have gone to the portal and added a big name quarterback. And instead, he grabs Jacob Zeno, seventh-year guy, to kind of just add some experience and depth into the room. Mike Elko likes Marcel Reed, and then I look at all the reasons to believe that Marcel Reed can take a step in 2025. It starts with just being the guy. Being the guy, taking the reps with the ones in spring practice and then in fall camp. Where last year, 12 months ago, it was very clear that Connor Wigman was the starting quarterback and the offense was built around Connor Wigman and not Marcel Reed. Now you're going into 2025 and say, hey, we're also building the offense around Marcel Reed, which matters because you look at Connor Wigman and Marcel Reed, they are two different quarterbacks with two different skill sets. You want to lean into what Marcel Reed can do as an athlete. Now you have Coach Colin Klein, an offensive coordinator that I really like, having a full year to really install an offense that leans into the traits and skills that Marcel Reed has. And then to cap it all off, I mean, you just got better playmakers around him. This is a Texas A&M wide receiver room that just wasn't that good and was not that consistent in 2024. Now you look at it in 2025 and say the ceiling for this room extremely high going into 2025. And then some other underlying kind of things that I think are pushing Texas A&M in the right direction. Year two under Mike Elko. This is, I think, a little bit more important than people give credit. And I kind of fall under the category of I'm a believer in Mike Elko as a program builder. But you go back and look at how Mike Elko talked about Texas A&M at times during last year. It's like, hey, this was a program that when I got to College Station, we didn't even know how to practice the right way. We had to learn how to practice before we could actually practice. All of that culture management and growing pains are now behind Texas A&M going into 2025. And then I think lastly, in a huge storyline, the offensive line. I'm a very big fan of Coach Cushing, and what he did with that offensive line in 2024 is clearly a unit that was way better than it was in 2023. It wasn't an elite unit in the 2024 year, but it was damn sure better than it was in the 2023 year. Now you return pretty much everybody on that offensive line, continuity being very important on the offensive line. You look at programs that have good offensive lines, it's when they have guys that have played a lot of football together year after year. It's kind of what Texas A&M has going into 2025. And so you look at it and say, that you maybe don't have the flashy storyline like Arch Manning taking over for Texas, but there's a lot of small storylines that I think are pushing Texas A&M in the right direction going into 2025. Then you take a look at the schedule, and I think Texas A&M fans know this by now. There's never an easy schedule when you play in the SEC, especially when you also have to go on the road and play Notre Dame. But I do think there are some aspects about this schedule that can allow Texas A&M to build some momentum. Want to get into that conversation, kind of preview some of these games before we do, as always. To the Texas A&M fans, one, I just want to say thank you. It's been really fun for me talking this program, really ever since Mike Elko has taken over the program. The amount of support that y'all continue to show to the fellas has been amazing. Can't thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, would love to hear what are the expectations for Texas A&M fans as we sit right now going into 2025. Now, we're not going to make an official prediction on this record for Texas A&M in 2025 because I think a lot can change. You got spring practice. We got to hear we got to see what we hear from spring practice. We got to see what the spring transfer portal brings us. But as we sit right now, what are the expectations? Would love to hear from y'all in the comment section. Without further ado, let's get into it. And let's just start by breaking up these games into, hey, what games are we confident that we win? What are the toss-up games? What are the games are we not favored in? The only game that, as I sit right now, I'm probably not picking Texas A&M is that last game at Texas. You go on the road to a Texas team that I think is very, very good. They're my number one team in the country. That me highlighting Texas in red has a lot more to do with what I think about Texas than what I do about Texas A&M. But at the end of the day, all of us who follow the sport of college football for the last 2 decades know that these rivalry games last week in November, they really are just toss-ups. Now, you look at the games that we're confident in. I think it starts with UTSA and Utah State. I mean, those should be at home, very easy wins where you are building momentum, gaining confidence. Then you go on the road to Notre Dame. And I think what's fascinating about this matchup as opposed to the matchup that we saw last year is the script is flipped, so to speak. Where how are we going to talk about this game? Well, now Texas A&M has the quarterback that has experience going into a big game. Where Notre Dame's quarterback, you don't even know who's going to be their starting quarterback. They got a 3-man race going into spring practice. Whoever wins the job is not going to be a quarterback that has played any meaningful football during their career. Last year was all right. It's a pretty evenly matched up game. And then you kind of give the edge to Riley Leonard and Notre Dame. And that's kind of how that game played out. Connor Wigman did not play good in the big moment. Riley Leonard didn't play great, but made plays to win football games for Notre Dame. Now it's kind of the opposite, where it's not like Marcel Reed is a fourth-year starting quarterback, but he's the more experienced quarterback than anybody that Notre Dame's going to be trotting out there. So although you go on the road, you probably give Texas A&M the nod in terms of what they have at the quarterback position. The only position where I think Texas A&M on paper gets worse at is on the defensive line. You probably have some question marks about the talent and the depth on the defensive line. Outside of that, I think Texas A&M has improved in pretty much every single facet of this football team. That's a toss-up game, and I think you'll kind of figure out how dangerous Texas A&M can be when they go on the road to play Notre Dame. You go into a bye week. You get Auburn at home. Look, I'm a believer in the roster that Auburn has. I think it's a very talented football team. There's 2 question marks. 1, Jackson Arnold. Number 2, Hugh Freeze and Auburn playing consistent football throughout a season. And you look at Auburn going on the road to Texas A&M. I highlighted it in purple because Auburn won last year, but I think just as importantly, I think Auburn's a team that can kind of bang with anybody in the country. But if you're a Texas A&M fan, Auburn going on the road to College Station, you're probably sitting there feeling pretty good about it. Mississippi State at home should be a comfortable win. Florida on the road in College Station, that toss-up game, we all saw how it went up last year. I'm a believer in Florida. But if you're a Texas A&M fan, you feel good anytime that you play your football games in College Station. On the road at Arkansas, I think should be, or that might not be on the, I probably messed that one up. I think should be on the road, although I got to check if that's a neutral site game or not. Regardless of where that game is being played, I should say, I have confidence that Texas A&M wins that. You go on the road to LSU, that is certainly a very difficult place to play. It's probably hard to sit here and say, hey, Texas A&M wins that one. Well, you certainly got question marks about LSU specifically on the offensive line. And I'll say this, if Texas A&M can surprise us on the upside on the defensive line, Cassius Howell or a guy like DJ Hicks or a guy like Dalen Evans, if those guys can develop into some real game wreckers, they can give some teams some problems, especially a team like LSU that is replacing pretty much that whole offensive line. Go into your bye week. On the road at Missouri, I bet some people have some question marks in terms of why I highlighted that in green. I got a lot of question marks about Missouri. And go back to last year, how that game went. Texas A&M won handily, dominated the football game. Like I said, I think Texas A&M gets better at most parts of this football team. Then you look at Missouri, you lose a guy like Brady Cook. You bring in Bo Prabula, who is kind of a mystery at this point, but he's a guy that, let's just be quite frank about it, has not been a starting quarterback. I know there's some buzz and optimism in the Missouri fan base around Bo Prabula, probably want to see it before you're buying a ton of stock in Missouri. You lose 2 NFL tackles. You lose a guy like Luther Burden. I think the defense should be solid, but there's a lot of question marks you have about Missouri heading into this 2025 season. I feel comfortable Texas A&M can get that one done. South Carolina at home, you love it, but Lenore Sellers is very difficult to deal with, as Texas A&M found out last year. Samford should be a win. To me, if you are a 8-3 football team going into your road game against Texas, that very well could be a college football playing game where you win that football game regardless if you go to the SEC championship. If you finish 9-3 with a road win against the Texas team that probably will be a college football playoff team, you'll put yourself in a really good spot, especially considering how many other big wins you might be able to notch in the 2025 season. There's a lot of wind at the sail of this Texas A&M team. There's a lot of reasons to believe in Texas A&M going into 2025. Now, can it all come together year two for Mike Elko? That's what we will find out. I think people need to be talking more about Texas A&M heading into the 2025 year. We'll close it out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.